Hi, folks. You're with Tassless Today. Tassless Today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the US election and the advantages and disadvantages that the candidates have. I guess, just looking at, we're in a new territory for elections. Firstly, the globalists took control of all the political machinery so that only their candidates would be standing for election. So there wasn't an issue of which it was whoever got the most traction with the people of the globalist candidates that were standing. So there wasn't any outsiders. You get the occasional outsider or someone who would be sort of on board with the globalist project, but not fully. And so they would later on be got rid of by the globalists. But effectively, the globalists had control of all the candidate selection machinery. So then along came Donald Trump, and that kind of upset that control factor they had. So they went into had to go into a new ball game, if you like, of demonizing the non-globalist candidate, which was Trump. Hillary was, globalist thrice over, so that was their candidate. And for the first time, probably since going back quite a way in the US, probably since Richard Nixon even, there was an outsider or someone who wasn't completely on board with the globalist project. And this was the first time that the globalists had come across, and they kind of at first didn't know what to do. And so beyond demonizing that outsider, literally Hitler, beyond doing that, and of course falling in line behind their own globalist candidate, they didn't really know how to deal with it. And they took the view that rigging elections is not only acceptable, but it's the kind of thing you do because you have to make sure your candidate wins. Now, that used to be a very much banana republic way of looking at political power and how it was transacted. But the globalists actually have enshrined this. So this is where we are now. It's enshrined in Western elections that it's quite okay to spread, lies on a scale that would have been unimaginable years ago. In aid of the globalist candidate or the globalist policies and so on. I'll come back to that in a minute. And I've sat around, at dinners and lunches and barbecues and so on, where the people there have been senior lawyers and judges and public servants and so on, and all people who are on living in wealthy postcodes where there's, it's 99% white, by the way, and they pretty much say it's acceptable. And in some cases, they say it's outright acceptable. There was a guy who's a senior, one of the most senior people in one of Australia's largest universities, who was outright saying it is quite absolutely acceptable to rig and fix elections to make sure that literally Hitler doesn't win, or more importantly, the globalist candidate was absolutely acceptable. Why wouldn't you do it? If you have the power to do it, why not? The only thing is you just try and have to make sure you don't get caught. And now these are, there are many people at the table who have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution, to uphold and abide by the law. And here they are quite brazenly saying that rigging and fixing elections is completely acceptable. Now, this is a widespread view, not simply in the United States or just in Australia, but pretty much any Western country, that rigging elections, and this could involve, say, in the case of Germany, where they simply outlaw the party that they don't like, or the anti-globalist party, or the party who's not fully on board with the globalist program. In Australia, there was a prime minister elected by the people who was not sufficiently on board with some of the globalist. Yes, he didn't want mass migration. He wanted skilled migration. He didn't want all this green nonsense. He wanted to plant more trees rather than go down the green energy path and this sort of thing. And they just got rid of him. We don't want him there. And they got all his fellow parliamentarians and politicians just to gang up on him and throw him out. and then to eject him from the parliament altogether. This is the power that the globalists have. And again, rigging and fixing is, and they have the power to do it. They've infiltrated all the institutions, so they'll manufacture statistics of any sort to support their candidate, support the so-called progressive changes had to be brought in to foment, race and gender conflict and so on. If black people appear more often in crime statistics was because of fascist Nazi racism and so on and so forth. So given all these organs of the public service, the educational institutions, the media, they're all being controlled by the globalists. I should add at this point, there's hardly any media institutions that would exist on the basis of the amount of media, newspapers or whatever, or online hits that they sell. There's none of them would survive. So the CNNs, the MSNBCs, none of these could or would exist in a properly commercial, competitive environment. They only exist and are propped up by the globalists to spread globalist propaganda. That's their only purpose. They couldn't exist in any commercial sense. Now, the same would go for really the educational institutions, the radicalization of kids, for example, through the college and lesbian dance and all this sort of stuff there. That's all globalist controlled and global supported. Same with the NGO network. But it doesn't matter whatever direction you look in, the globalist controlled institutions, media networks, education, public service, it doesn't matter, is all dedicated and directed to supporting the globalist candidate and supporting the policies that they suppose that the globalists want to have put in place. If we look at sort of Kamala's, coming back to this stuff, I look at there are various sites you can go on online that say how many stories are pro right wing or leaning left or more or less neutral, this sort of thing, and also stories that are pro Trump or pro Kamala. Now, the pro Kamala stories actually aren't that prevalent. It's more anti-Trump hit pieces that thus by default would support Kamala. So they're not trying so much, the globalists think that, well, Kamala's actually a pretty weak candidate, which she is. So the way we're going to win this is by demonizing Trump and the people that vote for him or support him. So that's clearly their tactic. They want an anti-Trump vote, and I think that's their best option of winning. Now they'll come out with stuff like, well, if you don't vote for Kamala, it means you're a misogynist Nazi. Or something. They're doing that, but typically it's the hit pieces that really. So as I look at these statistics and I look at it fairly regularly, pretty much every day. There's anywhere between sort of 78 and 93% anti-Trump or anti-Trump and or pro-Kamala in the international media. That includes Australia. In Australia, for example, you're hard pressed. In fact, I haven't seen a single mainstream media article, not one, that is pro-Trump in any way, or even neutral and moderate. They're all severely, hysterically anti-Trump, literally Hitler type stuff, or they try and paint Kamala in a very sympathetic light. Oh well, if she's not that good a candidate, it's only because there are too many patriarchal misogynists around, and they're all Nazis anyway. That sort of stuff. But even in Australia, the same goes in Britain. If I look at the mainstream media in Britain, again, the anti-Trump hit pieces are just everywhere. Same goes in Germany, anti-Trump hit pieces everywhere. France and on it goes. So the entire international media establishment is dedicated to doing anti-Trump hit pieces. Now, I don't think I've seen that much hysteria. The hysteria wasn't that big in 2016 when Trump was first standing for presidential office. But back then, I did look at the way that the US media, at least, and the institutions were fully supporting Hillary. And on that basis, I just assumed, well, Hillary's going to win. And when you got that much support from then the entire media pack is backing you and demonizing Trump, then Hillary's going to win on that basis alone. or so I thought. And I've mentioned this before. I was doing some work, so I had my head buried in the computer, and then I had Fox News. This is during the election, the US election, and I had Fox News on cable in background. Had the volume down because I didn't want it to interrupt what I was doing. And then I heard something along the lines of, and I think this was it. Well, it looks like Mr. Trump's won Florida, and with Florida, we're predicting now that he will be the next president of the United States. And I thought, if I heard that properly, and I remember turning around and looking and thinking, well, so I went over to the TV and I turned up the volume and started to look, and I was like, holy smokes, Trump's going to win. And it was quite a shock to me. I was rather pleased with it because I thought Hillary would be an establishment globalist candidate and would just continue with the policies that even then I was convinced were seriously ruining the West and were being imposed. My main beef was this was all being imposed on the people, the globalist project, imposed on people without the consent of the people. And of course, there are a few ways of getting around the consent of the people, apart from not letting them vote, is just to make sure all the candidates are globalist candidates. Now, the globalists don't care which one wins. The one that the people like the most will have the longest honeymoon period. In that time, they can implement yet more globalist policies more quickly and more aggressively than they otherwise could have. But again, dealing with a non-globalist candidate that Trump was, he was a candidate that cared about America and the American people, which is non-permissible in the current age. No Western politician is allowed to care about and legislate for and on behalf of the people. That's simply, that's criminal. That's literally Hitler. So what advantages does Kamala have in this election? Well, as a candidate, none. They haven't really bothered with policy. They've talked vaguely about, and most of the policy talk discussion has been straw man. Trump has outlawed abortion. No one can get an abortion. And women are dying by the million, the gazillion. But we'll fix that. But that's, of course, bullshit. And Trump has stacked the Supreme Court with fascists. Well, that's bullshit. And so it's typically a straw man, emotional, terrify the college kids type propaganda. So they haven't got policies. If I've looked sort of to try and find policies, but it's all vague stuff and straw man thing of they're countering Trump, they're stopping the fascists and this sort of thing. But it's all straw man stuff. They're not stopping anything because there is no fascism to stop. They're the fascists, for goodness sakes. So without policies, Kamala can only go, well, I'm a non-white woman, and if you don't vote for me, you're a misogynist, racist, literally Hitler and all that sort of stuff. So they're trying that. I don't know. That'll probably get traction with the college kids and the lesbians, that sort of thing. But I don't think it'll get. That doesn't appeal to the masses. That sort of nonsense messaging. So the policy she doesn't have. She isn't a particularly likable person. She's certain angles, camera angles. She's reasonably photogenic. She's got good teeth, so again, quite a nice smile, sort of, again, depending on the camera angle. But I don't see that she's got anything there. She's not, if she is intelligent, she hides it with incredible effectiveness. If she's got sound judgment, then wow, that again is exquisitely concealed. So the reality is, and this is very clear and obvious reality, she's just a flunky stooge for the globalists. That's all she is. She's nothing else, just that. And she'll sign whatever they tell her to sign, and she'll say whatever they tell her to say. She'll read whatever speech they put in front of her. That's it. Like Biden, she's just a globalist stooge. The idea, if anyone had an idea that Biden was making decisions. So now on the issue of electoral fraud and undermining the probity and integrity of elections, I've no doubt they'll do as much as they can that they think they can get away with. I think they did it with Hillary in that 2016 election. They just didn't do enough of it. I think they swung probably 3 or 4 million votes to Hillary. I think they were invented in a back room, but it just wasn't enough. And Trump won the key states, and they didn't quite factor that into their calculus, again, because they had the whole media establishment on side. In 2020, they didn't make the same mistake. I think they manufactured somewhere in the region of 20 million votes for Biden, give or take. And he's a very weak candidate. He's a very poor speaker. He didn't campaign. And there were mysterious arrivals of gazillions of ballots that seemed to be overwhelmingly for Biden. I mean, no one can say that isn't something that needed a very tight audit, an audit that was never done, by the way. So this idea that it's because Kamala's a weak candidate and so on means she's going to lose. It's much harder for them without the COVID scare, and it's much more difficult for them to rig the election to the same extent this time. Could they manage to put in a few million votes? I think in areas, say, like California, New York, where and in areas where they've got complete and total and absolute top to bottom, left to right control of all the vote counting machinery, I don't doubt they can slip votes in there. In some of the swing states, I think it'll be harder for them to do. And there's a lot more scrutiny by the Republican, vote scrutineers and oversight people than there was before, which I thought was a major mistake of the Republican machinery in the 2020 election. But anyway, so Kamala's got, I'm going to say, short of rigging the election, I don't think she can win. And I don't think she can even come close, short of rigging the election. Now, you could say the misinformation, the lies they tell, Trump literally Hitler, that sort of thing. That's rigging the election. It kind of is, I guess, in a way. But other than their lies and lies, more lies, and then lies on top of that, other than their lies and inventions and hysterical assertions and accusations, they've got no real policy. So they can't win on policy. They can't win on the economy. They can't win on track record. They can't win on anything that a normal, politician could win on. But again, we come back to this thing. The globalists have dismantled all the machinery that means you vote for the policies of the political party or candidate that you like. The globalists have done away with all of that. They've introduced a new electoral system where only their candidates are allowed to stand for office. Only their policies are allowed to be put forward. Only their policies, the globalist policies, this is, are allowed to be implemented, enacted, and put into law, and so on. And if we look at the wider politicization of all the machinery of government, whether it's the FBI or the CIA or anything, any party, the health organizations and all that sort of stuff, it's all been politicized, every bit of it, at all levels. And that's all in support of the globalist candidate as well. And they issue all sorts of lies that, hey, the economy is doing really good, and this, but it's all bullshit. We have the same in Australia, by the way. The government recently claiming that unemployment is at an all-time low, and that this means we need more mass migration. At the same time as all the real indicators are going completely the other way. There were. 5 years ago, there were jobs where you'd be lucky to get 10 applicants for the job. Now there are 200 applicants for that job. That's how big the difference is. But yet unemployment's supposed to be an all-time low. I mean, what a load of bullshit. Huh? But anyway, coming back to, so Kamala's got nothing in the strict political sense to win on. There's nothing, absolutely nothing. Trump, by contrast, does. He's got quite a lot. The cost of energy when Trump was president, the unemployment rate, the way he limited the mass migration, and all this sort of stuff. He did have some achievements there, not as much as I'd have liked anyway, and I don't think he moved swiftly and decisively enough on a number of levels, let down by the people he had, and I don't think any of his people were aware of the extent of the deep state, the globalist deep state, and the extent to which they push back. So people like Jeff Sessions and so on were just out of their depth. He just didn't know what to do. You saw him at some of his press briefings and so on, and he looked like some punch drunk sort of fighter there, sort of staggering around. And if he was a more switched on political operative. I mean, some of the people who need to be street fighters, because that's what the Democrats and the globalists are doing. They're street fighters, and you need to really play that sort of game with them. Everything from the media attacks to the lawfare and so on. But Trump does have a good story to tell, and he is appealing to the people. I will fix real problems, not the imaginary problems of there's neo-Nazis everywhere and fascists here and literally Hitler there and misogyny, racism and so none of that. That's all invented and hustled and grifted. And Trump is going to solve real issues, such as bringing down the price of groceries from the store, reducing the cost of energy, bringing jobs back to the United States, stopping the mass immigration, repatriating the illegal mass immigrants, and so on and so forth. These are things will all make a difference to rent, real estate prices, grocery prices, energy prices. The lives of ordinary Americans will be better. It's the same in Australia, by the way. The cost of living over the last 5 to 6 years, this is annual cost per person, by the way, annual cost. It now costs $21,000 more to have the same lifestyle today as you did 6 years ago. This is a combination of increases in rent and increase in groceries and travel costs, costs of energy and petroleum and so on. So this is the difference we're talking about. Now, if Trump can even reduce that in half or reduce most of it, then that's going to be a huge, we're talking this is assuming the average wage here. This is going to be $1,000 a month. People are going to be better off if Trump wins and follows through on his policies. So Trump's got the people on his side, and he's got real practical solutions to real practical problems that he's addressing, which is, again, part of his wider policy platform. So he's got the people on side. The people aren't happy. They don't want the globalist program. They don't want the mass migration. They don't want the bullshit Green New Deal. They don't want any of those things. And Trump's going to address, at least in his policy platform. Now, if he moves decisively and aggressively to do these things, then and gets them done, he's got the right sort of people in place. And people like Tulsi Gabbard, for example. Certainly on the face of it, she looks like someone who's going to get things done, and I hope she does in whatever area of responsibility that President Trump decides to allocate. I'll say for the umpteenth time, gee whiz, Mr. Trump, give me a call. I'll be over there solving all sorts of, or endeavouring to solve all sorts of things. Among them being making sure that the scams about illegal workers, workers can work permits and bringing in issuing work visas and all that sort of stuff, put an end to all that, because that's a scam of absolutely monumental proportions that needs to be brought under control. Happy to address that one. But so Trump, I would say that when it comes to the policy side of thing and what the people want, again, addressing real issues, real problems, making people's lives better and so on, then Donald Trump is miles ahead, a gazillion miles ahead on that score. So my thought would be, without election rigging, and I've no doubt they'll try it, or even more drastic, more assassination attempts. Without that, I think Donald Trump will win, and I see him picking up somewhere between 295 and 320 electoral college votes. Now, this is, again, a remarkable achievement given the entire international globalist establishment is against him. You cannot look at any media article anywhere at any time that is not attacking him and doing the literally Hitler propaganda and so on, so that he could prevail in spite of all that will be a remarkable achievement. Now, I've noticed some of the some of the Zuckerbergs and those sort of people that are typically in 2020 were Google and so on, were hugely on board with Biden, or the globalist candidate, which happened to be Biden, and some of them aren't quite as frantic and hysterical as they were in 2020, so they've been more restrained. Now, I don't know how to interpret that, Does that mean they're a little bit more Australian because the fix is in, the rig is already in? Is that it? Or are they just tempering, their college kid attitude to, TDS college kid attitude? I don't know. It's on one side, I think, are they accepting the will of the people? Because these folks don't. The will of the people is that's where the literally Hitler thing comes from. Well, if we let the people decide, it's literally Hitler. We, the globalist goons and stooges, we have to decide. So I'm not sure how to interpret that, but anyway, I think and hope, by the way, that Trump will win. I hope, sort of in my dreamy state, I hope it absolutely obliterates them. But I don't think it'll go that far. But I am predicting Trump to win, and again, certainly hope he does. And if he does, it'll be against all the odds, which makes it even more of a triumph and an accomplishment. You've been on Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for listening.